Hello and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to deal with the good, the bad and the horrific of movies, either starring, about or by pop stars. You know, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to science fiction, from documentaries to hip-hop. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a writer for Byline Times, the Geek Show, and we are Cult. I also make films and write inlay booklets for Second Run from time to time, including the new one, Dragon's Return. I've just got, that's got a quote from me on the back, so I am very, very excited by that. But enough about my flannel. I am joined by...
I've got to say, before I say you're joined by me, that every time we do this, you get more and more like one of those auctioneers at a cattle market.
It's my dream to just get through the whole podcast in 5 minutes flat.
It's impressive. I like it. You're joined by Mark Cunliffe, who also writes for the Geek Show, appears on Letterboxd, has done several of these podcasts now. I've got a chapter in Scarred for Life Volume 2, which is available from lulu.com, and I write inlay essays too for Arrow Film, including Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which is out on November 28th.
Ah, lovely. Yes. I read a bit of Alan Rickman's diaries recently.
Oh, brilliant. Are they good?
They are gorgeous. I really enjoyed them. But I liked his comment when I forget what it was, he picked up some award for his performance as the Sheriff of Nottingham, and he said it's a reminder that subtlety isn't always the thing you should be going for.
Absolutely, yeah. Fantastic performance.
Oh yeah, what a man. But yes, this is the Butcher Boy is this week's film, and it's a film that I've wanted to do ever since the early days of Pop Screen. It feels like the kind of I like doing films that make people go, wait, that exists. And this is very much that kind of film, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's our subject today is Sinead O'Connor, isn't it? Although
it is.
That's not her name anymore, is it?
It's her recording name. She's happy to to be known as a recording artist under it. She is currently Shuhada Sadaqat. I don't think I'm pronouncing that rightly, but
no. Well, I was still on. Was it David? I think it was Magda David. I think was a name at one point. So I'm still with that one.
Magda David. Yes, you are quite right. Yeah.
She'll go for a squiggle eventually, and then it'll be full circle like Prince.
It will, aptly enough, yeah. Like
aptly
Prince.
Enough, indeed, yeah.
Yeah. Two collaborators and nemesis who were doomed to eventually become each other. It's a bit like Persona or something. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. This is quite a timely podcast as well, isn't it? Because the documentary is out at the moment.
Nothing Compares. Yeah, I haven't caught that yet, but I am very excited to see that because apparently, rather than be a whole career overview, it aims to sort of contextualize those 6 or 7 years where she went from being a breakthrough artist who everyone predicted would be the next big thing to being a pariah, really, detested.
And notoriety in between, I guess. Plays into this film, really. I mean, you can't get much more notorious casting than Sinead O'Connor as the Virgin Mary.
as sweary Virgin Mary, yes. A song that I don't think made the film version of Lyle Lyle Crocodile. But
Should have done. Should have done. It's bold casting, but it's fun casting, and like you say, it's almost what pop screen should be about, really, isn't it? To look at these weird little cameos like this. You want a weird little cameo of icon. This is probably one of the best to go to. Although it's not a major, probably.
3 scenes, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's not a major one, is it? I wonder if this is the shortest amount of screen time we're going to really explore on.
I'm sure we've shoehorned something worse than this. One day we'll do Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me, like analysed through the lens of that 2-minute David Bowie cameo. But for now,
I mean, there is a bigger role for her. This isn't her first sort of acting role. The one was previous was an Irish film called Hushabye Baby, I think it's called. Baby, I think.
Was that pre-fame? Was that something she did before she?
No, it was because when was the first album? 87, was it?
Yeah. I'm looking
this
through the Wikipedia page, but there is not a filmography section, which I think is, I guess that kind of links in with how acting is seen as a extremely minor part of her career, but it's a shame.
Yeah, I think it's about 90 at a guess. I haven't got my
bang on. IMDb has it. Hushabye Baby, 1990, in which she was boldly cast against type as a woman called Sinead.
Yeah. Although technically she was, because, like you say, it was
during her Magda years.
It was that kind of. She was already notorious, I guess, at this point, and she's playing a very devout, quiet, aspiring to be a nun friend in the group. It's like it's an interesting film. It was made by like a sort of film unit, like a cultural film unit, where they do workshops with the community and then try and tell community stories as a movie, which is great. But one of the problems with a lot of those experiments is that you get a lot of different stories and you throw it all against the wall and see which sticks.
Yeah.
So the film starts like a very proto Derry Girls almost, but then descends into this one of the bleakest experiences I've sat through on film, because it becomes about the Troubles and abortion and the right to abort, which Ireland didn't have, unfortunately, and it becomes very bleak. But again, based on true stories. So yeah, that's. I'm glad we're not talking about that. As good as film as it is, I'm glad, because it's a bleak one. Whereas this isn't bleak, is it? This is colourful.
It is a very dark comedy, but it's surprisingly easy to watch, I would say.
It sort of it pops on the screen for pop screen, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And it's also I think we should say the second time in a row, I think, that we've been together for something that has a connection to Mac the Knife.
All right, okay, yeah. Well, we did
Bal,
didn't we? Yeah.
And this,
yes, it's the old. Yeah,
it kicks off with that odd kind of very ironic Muzak version of Mac the Knife, which is a clever choice because it's the whole film in microcosm. Mac the Knife is a. I mean, I love it. It's a horrible song about a misogynistic serial killer that somehow became a standard, and now here it is in this absolutely chintzy version, and it's like it's preparing you for the fact that this is a film about the horror that lurks underneath chintz.
It became a very watered down standard, didn't it? I suppose Bobby Darin has a lot to answer for, I guess, doesn't he?
I think he does. Yeah, I mean, it's
lounge lizardy spin on it. Yeah,
it's an irresistible melody, but the theme of it and the fact that it came from like a Marxist musical about poverty in Weimar Germany, I also think makes it a pretty bloody unlikely choice for all those Vegas crooners to have a bash at.
Just a bit, yeah. I'm watching the Road to Freedom at the moment, which is on BBC4 a few months back.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to catch up on it, and it's used very well in that because night that Hitler delivers a speech that basically just, it's he's going to invade Czechoslovakia, so shit's hitting the fan basically.
Yeah.
And they're in France, and one cabaret singer says, "Well, I'm still going to perform." He's like, "Well, no, there's going to be nobody there." It's like, "No, I will perform. There'll be some people there." "All right, what are you going to perform?" "Vile." she proceeds to sing "Matt the Knife" in German, terrifying the the stuffed shirts in the cabaret in France. So that's a good way of putting Matt the Knife in something, not the chintzy Bobby Darin style.
No. But it's a good opening for that, and it also opens with that amazing montage of all of the comic books that Francie, the hero of this film, is reading, and it's a really interesting opening because I think it would be quite a normal thing for most countries to have a coming of age story told through the lens of popular culture and the things that you enjoyed as a kid. It's a very regular thing to see in British or American films. But when you talk about Ireland in the 60s, I mean, some people talk about it as though it was North Korea. Some people talk about it in ways that make you question whether it had any contact with the outside world at all. But here's this Irish film, a very Irish film set in the 60s, opening with this German song that's been reclaimed by Vegas singers, and this montage of big brash American comic books, and immediately it tells you that it tells you in many ways that there is more to Ireland than this, if you will.
There's more to Ireland than this. I was going to say because for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, to jump in, and we've just mentioned a chintzy version of Matt the Knife and comic book titles. You would think you're watching, oh right, so this is something in America set in the 50s or something like that, but it's not. It's, as you say, it's Ireland. It's based on a novel by Patrick McCabe, is it?
Patrick McCabe, yes. Who, according to Wikipedia, his literary style is neo-delusional, which there is no link to that, no citation, and I think it might not live much longer on that page.
I like that, though. I'm going to use that as my Instagram profile bio line now. Neo-delusional. That's good. I like that. But yeah, it's weird because it's probably one of the most Irish films ever, in the sense that it really gets under the psyche of the national character. But it's, as you say, it doesn't depict an insular island of the 50s. That island that was looking out towards America, probably getting a sort of a hint of pride at Kennedy, I guess.
Yeah, perhaps.
And sort of looking more on the international stage as a result, feeling a bit more emboldened about itself. But it's in contrast to what we think of Ireland, because a lot of Irish films based around this time are very dark, dour, hatchet-faced priests in long frock coats on cobbled streets.
Yes,
And there is an element of that in this, but I wouldn't say they were hatchet-faced. Everybody's quite cheery, aren't they? In a really sort of grotesque, cheery manner, really, aren't they?
It's one of those period films where most of the cast, particularly the older male cast, look a bit like Toby Jugs, which is quite nice, I think. I always enjoy that level of kind of, as you say, the cheerful grotesquerie of it all.
The rosy cheeked, aren't they? That is true. Yeah. It's not Angela's Ashes, basically, is what we're saying here.
Yeah, and I think in order to get a sense of how different it is, you do have to look at things like Angela's Ashes, or what was the Barry Levinson one, wasn't it? An Everlasting Peace. Other
Oh yeah,
films,
yeah. Strange
particularly
film, yeah.
international films about Ireland made around this time, that all, I suppose they're two poles of it, aren't they? An Everlasting Peace is quite sort of lightweight and jolly and blarney-ish, and Angela's Ashes is really sort of bleak, a kind of proto misery memoir. And this hops between the two in a way that's fun but also really disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean, this is blackly comic from a novel
Mm,
that many believe was unfilmable. But it does sort of, like you say, it straddles these territories, doesn't it? And I
yeah,
guess I was trying to think where Ireland became hugely popular in the 90s.
yeah.
Possibly the Commitments, maybe. But there was a whole energy of Ireland at the time, like Celtic Tiger, um,
Good
seemingly winning
Friday
your
Agreement.
Good Friday Agreement, seemingly winning Eurovision every year for about
Yes.
6 years, I think, but it felt
Yeah.
longer. To the point where they even went, now come on, lads, we can't do this again.
Well, that's what bankrupted the Celtic Tiger in the end,
Exactly.
wasn't it?
Give
The expense of
somebody else a
hosting
go.
Eurovision every single fucking year.
For fuck's sake, give Latvia a go or something. So
Yeah.
it sort of rides that crest of a wave, really, of like suddenly Ireland was just huge in the 90s, particularly in cinema, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah, and I think this is kind of an outlier in that even something like The Commitments, for all it's written by Roddy Doyle, who's a great Irish author, but even The Commitments feels like it's been made by people who were thinking in the back of their mind, other people could connect with this, British people could connect with this, Americans could connect with this. This, for all that it was backed by an American company, and we'll get on to that because it's quite an interesting one, this feels very much like, well, it's taken Paul McCartney's sentiment to heart, hasn't it? This is Ireland for the Irish.
give Ireland back to the Irish.
Yeah, give Irish cinema back to the Irish, and you
Yeah,
get the Butcher Boy.
yeah, yeah. Directed, of course, by Neil Jordan, who we should say was also probably very integral in sort of putting Ireland back on the map in terms of cinema in the
Yes,
90s, with the Crying Game probably being his sort of breakthrough statement of Ireland. Although obviously, he had a career before that, Mona Lisa, even Angel as well. But I think the Crying Game was probably the one that sort of was a calling card to Hollywood, would we say?
definitely, yeah. And it's interesting because the Crying Game in its production was a film that nobody wanted to fund. No one thought that would be commercial.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
politics of it, the way it dealt with the troubles, obviously the sexual politics of it as well. The trans character was thought to be just beyond what an audience could take, and it was
Yes,
funded
yeah.
by Stephen Woolley, who seems to make a career out of funding things that no one else wants to make. Uh,
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
but I think I love Neil Jordan. I don't think every one of his films works, but I think as a career, he's had an extraordinary career, and he's made some
Yeah,
films that are among my favourites.
he's always somebody to look out for, isn't he? I mean,
Mm,
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say he was one of my. No, I don't know actually. Would I say he was one of my favorite directors? I'm not sure, but I watch what he does.
yeah,
I mean, The Crying Game and Mona Lisa, I think, are just incredible uh, films. Really, um, do I think he's done better since? Possibly not, but I always enjoy what he does, or I'm intrigued to see what he's going to do.
for me,
Um,
it's The Company of Wolves. I think The Company of Wolves is one of the most extraordinary films ever
yeah,
made.
yeah, really good film, really good film. Yeah, yeah. And perfect for this time of year as well.
Absolutely, yeah. A
Halloween.
very fine spooky season film with Angela Lansbury in it. So if anyone wants to do a topical rewatch of that, then now's the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But it's one of the really interesting things about Neil Jordan that I think gives you the measure of what kind of director he is looking at how he spent the capital that he'd got with The Crying Game, because that's the kind of home run that every director dreams of. Your low budget little film that everyone thought was too spiky and too confrontational to find an audience just won an Oscar. What do you do? And in Jordan's case, he signs not with Universal or Paramount or Warner Brothers or anyone like that. He signs with the Geffen Company.
Another music
Indeed.
inroad for us to look at. Yeah.
David Geffen at the time really wanted to get into films, and his big play at the start of it was Interview with the Vampire, which Neil Jordan directed for him. And that was kind of interesting. Firstly, because, like I say, there aren't many people who have an Oscar-winning drama about the Troubles and then go, vampire movie it is. That's quite weird for a start.
Yeah. With Hollywood A-listers. It's Tom Cruise,
Brad Pitt,
yeah. River Phoenix was supposed to be in it, wasn't he? But
oh yeah, it was Christian Slater in the end.
Yeah,
took that part. Yes,
I mean, it's a star-studded cast, and you see the building blocks, don't you, in his career? He does Angel, he does Company of Wolves, which shows his horror interests.
Yeah,
that sort of eerie sort of. I say horror, but it's not like horror. It's sort of.
That was part of the trouble, because I mean, early 80s horror. I think the Company of Wolves would have been understood if it had come out against the backdrop of like Hammer Studios. I think it's a film in conversation with that kind of horror, but
yeah.
In America, they tried to sell it as a slasher because that's what was big then, and it just doesn't work as that kind of movie at all.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head with Hammer. The wonderful thing about Hammer was always that it felt like fairy tales for mature audiences.
Absolutely, yes.
And that is definitely Angela Carter's. It's a fairy tale for a mature audience, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was going to be how that was going to be Jordan's next project. He wanted to reteam with Carter to do an adaptation of The Lady of the House of Love, which is another in the volume of short stories that he got Company of Wolves from. But Carter died tragically young of cancer while he was working on that, and he, I think, understandably had the idea that you can't do Carter without Carter, so he took the ideas about vampires that were going to be part of that script that he'd had and transplanted them into what I think is a more commercial thing. I mean, Anne Rice's books are very eccentric, and she was a very eccentric woman, and I think that's what makes them interesting. That's what makes her worthwhile. But she was definitely a more commercial, digestible kind of horror writer.
Yeah, it's rock star vampires, isn't it? It's, when she sort of said that Lestat was supposed to be Sting, it's and with Sting's interest in cinema as well. It's rock star vampires. I mean, that's that. Did they say that Miami Vice was MTV Cops? I think.
Yeah.
If you walked into a boardroom in Hollywood in the 90s, went rock star vampires, I'm sure they'd just sign it and give it to you straight away.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they didn't get Sting, I mean, for all his faults, for all Tom Cruise's faults, at least it wasn't Sting, That's one way of looking at it. The
Interview with the Vampire. Yes. Interview with the Vampire is kind of an odd film, I think, because Carter's works, I mean, you bring up the fairy tale connection. Fairy tales are all about maturing, about leaving childhood behind, and she parallels that with puberty. But Interview with the Vampire is kind of about arrested development. You're meant to want Lestat and Louis to continue to be these kind of angsty brats for centuries. That's the fun of it.
yeah, true. And I guess this was the second film with Geffen. It was the
I think
last.
no, I think this was the third one actually.
Oh,
I
was
think
it?
in between he did Michael Collins, which is another sort of odd collision of like Irish subject matter and Hollywood production.
Yeah, not. I have a lot of time for it, but it's riddled with inaccuracies, historical inaccuracies.
Yeah.
And I've listened to the director's commentary, and Jordan tries to explain why, defend why, and it doesn't really come off. It's almost like a John Fordian version of you get that kind of. It's a bit twee, but it's still a good film. So it goes Interview with a Vampire, Michael Collins, and this, right?
And then The Butcher Boy, which is like exactly as tough and as unsentimental as Michael Collins isn't, I guess.
Yeah, and also in a way sort of plays back to what you were saying about Carter in the sense that, it's the fairy tale of puberty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it is a coming of age story at its heart, except that the person we're witnessing coming of age is from the outset a bully, and then by the end of the film, an incarcerated murderer.
Yes.
And that's some coming of age.
It really is. And you've introduced him, this kid Frankie, who's played in a really great performance by Eamonn Owens. I mean,
fantastic performance.
One of Neil Jordan's constant strengths is that he can always find great child performers. You think of Kirsten Dunst in Interview with the Vampire, a role that on paper I think would look uncastable, but it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this is very similar. Isn't it? You need a seriously good child actor to play this role. I mean, if this novel is unfilmable, then you would imagine that this character is uncast. But God, everybody knows of Francie Brady, unfortunately, because he is the school bully. And it's that horrible, grotesque, faux chumminess that he has that would just, if you've witnessed a bully at work or if you've been bullied yourself, it will send your spine to liquid ice water, really, won't it? The way he puts his arms over people.
Yeah.
Ooh, that grin. It's you know that character.
And yet, in a weird way, you stick with him. I mean, the moment we're introduced to him after a very funny prologue where we see a bit of him in the prologue, but not literally just a bit of him. He's covered from head to toe in bandages, and there's just this like little beady eye peeking out. But the first we see of him, he's running across the church rooftop with his friend Joe, and he's scrumping apples, and it's the sort of thing that is usually part of a very bucolic Enid Blyton style picture of boyhood misadventures, but it balances that kind of thing with a sense of the real meanness and the real kind of dysfunctional family that provokes this delinquency.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's we shouldn't side with him, but we do, which is weird. I mean, we should side really with the character of Philip Nugent, who is
his victim,
the poor boy who life he makes a misery, and Philip's mother, Mrs. Nugent, whose seemingly the only crime is that she's a bit snooty as she went to England. By Fiona Shaw, which is
I love Fiona Shaw. Yeah,
really good performance. I mean, this is a starry cast. I'm sure we'll want. Fiona Shaw is very good role, but we shouldn't. The victims, we should really be siding with the victims. Something uncompromising about McCabe's novel or Jordan's direction or screenplay or whatever that just says, no, this is who I'm putting you alongside with. This is our protagonist. You're going to stick with him. And you do, to the point where you end up, really feeling something for what is a horrible child.
I mean, I have a friend, Chris Browning, who said on Letterboxd that it's a measure of this film's greatness that I see a lot of my childhood self in Philip Nugent, and yet I stuck with this film all the way. You know, I was never repelled by it.
That's true, and I think some of that is just down to Eamonn Owens' fantastic performance for a child. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Full of brio and cheek and chutzpah, which I think was evident. Wonderful anecdotes where he goes for his, he goes for the interview, and literally walked in and went, "Was the kid before me any good?" They were like, "Well, why?" I said, "But because if he was, there's no point me doing this audition, you know." And you just say that's probably got you the job straight away, because that's
exactly
to a T, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly what he'd say. Yeah.
But I think it's a measure of how good he is as a performer. And child performers are notoriously risky, especially to actually carry an entire movie on their shoulders.
Yeah,
very risky proposition, but he does it. He does it really, really well, and holds his own against an incredible cast.
Yeah, it is a fantastic cast, and I think one of the strengths of it is that it has some really well-known faces in it, but none of them ever overshadow the young cast. Even people like Fiona Shaw and Stephen Ray, who have a lot of screen time. Like, the only time I felt distracted by someone was when you've got that farmer who he goes for tractor rides with, who goes on about communists, and it's like, oh man, who's that guy? I looked it up. It's the Pat Gry who plays Hood Hastings in the sheep breeding episode of Father Ted.
Yeah. And it's a great role, isn't it? Because it's very much going back to the comic strip thing. You know, it's very nuclear age with the paranoia of the bomb and Reds under the beds, and of course that sort of bug-eyed monster type science fiction thing all feeds into this, doesn't it? But you're right about the cast. It is that kind of cast that even the smaller roles were probably in Father Ted or Ballykiss Angel at the time.
Yeah, part of that again, that kind of increase in Irish themed media around the time really drew attention to the fact that the country has this incredibly deep bench of character actors. You know, you've even got Milo O'Shea in there as the paedophile priest who Branson falls foul of.
Twinkly Milo O'Shea playing a paedophile priest was a surprise, really. But it's still, it shouldn't be a nice role, but it's still, you think, oh, it's Milo O'Shea, you know.
It fits very well, doesn't it, into, and I suppose this goes back to Sinead O'Connor being in it, because the thing that really derailed her career was speaking out against paedophilia in the Catholic Church. But it fits very neatly into how that was talked about before there was any journalistic attention on it, where you've got a local priest and he likes fiddling about with the boys, but it's just his thing. You know, people just accept it in this really eerie, unnerving way.
It's like it's par for the course, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is horrible. Different times, isn't it? It's just bizarre that we even think of it like that now. But it's great. But just to go back to the cast. I mean, you've also got Brendan Gleeson as another priest in the Reform School, haven't you? And I mean, for one Irish film to have Ardal O'Hanlon in is like, you know, but to then have Sean Hughes in there as well.
I felt genuinely wistful when I saw Sean Hughes's face at the hospital. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lovely little role for him, isn't it? And then you've got, and it's obviously, you know, Jordan has his regulars as well, doesn't he? So you've got Ian Hart, who had just done Michael Collins with Jordan, and Stephen Ray, of course. I'm sure Jordan can make a film without Stephen Ray, but He hasn't done it yet, I don't.
And why would you want
And
to?
why would
Really?
you? Yeah.
Yeah. He's a wonderful actor, and he's there's almost an element in this where it's like a farcical replay of Ray's role in Jordan's first film, Angel, where he played a musician, and you introduced him here as Francie's alcoholic dad, who in his first scene is playing the trumpet along with the Lone Ranger theme on TV.
It's a lovely touch, that, isn't it? I mean, I would put money on the fact that that is probably based on someone, that somebody has done that and it's an old family. Oh, do you remember when Dad used to get his trumpet out to play along to the Lone Ranger theme? Whether it's something from Jordan's family or whether it's a Cabe's family, that little touch, I don't think you can arrive upon that touch. I think it's existed somewhere. And
yes, it
filed it away. Filed
it
away for future reference. Yeah. And then, of course, Sinead O'Connor as the Virgin Mary, who comes to Francie during his scenes in the reform school.
And it's great having O'Connor in there because it's obviously a very provocative piece of casting, but the thing is with Sinead O'Connor is that she's never done anything that's just been a provocation. She's not Madonna, who famously, vocally disapproved of her ripping up that photo of the Pope. But
that was a bit strange.
I think that I forget who said it, but someone suggested that Madonna was pissed off that at that time in her career, she was very invested in being shocking. It was the time when she was most deliberately controversial, and suddenly, this upstart comes along and does something that causes a bigger stink than she ever did in her career.
Yeah,
just casually. Yeah,
he's beat it to the jump. Yeah. I think you're right there. Yeah, it's but yeah, as you said about the Milo O'Shea character, it's a mark of. This is no pun intended, but it's a mark of people singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yes,
in terms of what they want to say about Ireland, and that you would cast Sinead O'Connor in that role, and she would happily perform that role. I mean, Jordan says that the reason he cast her as the Virgin Mary is because he looked like the Virgin Mary,
which is true. Yeah,
it's true, absolutely true. Although I did read, I don't know how true this is, but I did read that. He wanted to cast Marilyn Monroe. He'd seen some sort of CGI on Forrest Gump and thought, I wonder if he could do that, but worked out that it would have been too expensive. Now, whether that is just like somebody trolling us on Internet Movie Database, but I think it is there in the trivia section.
Yes. I'm reminded slightly of was it Leos Carax who was asked why he cast Denis Lavant in Holy Motors, and he said, well, my first choice, Lon Chaney, was dead, so...
Yeah. Good luck trying to cast Marilyn. But I guess, maybe even John did say that, but I think he's playing a bit of a quirkiness on... He's fueling the myth, really, I guess, isn't he? I imagine he could say, well, if the Virgin Mary doesn't, somebody who looks like the Virgin Mary and is a pop icon figure for the 90s, isn't Sinead O'Connor coming to visit Francie, then it would be a pop icon figure from his time.
His era, yeah, I suppose that's very true. Yeah, and the film is very linked in with his fantasies. There's that gorgeous scene where he imagines, a Soviet nuclear strike on his town, and it's nothing at all like Threads. It's pure 50s bug-eyed monster B-movie stuff. Yeah.
He's got a fevered imagination, hasn't he? Let's just say that. Yeah. And of course, you get Stephen Ray not only playing the dad, but also playing sort of like the voice of Francie's conscious, should we say?
It's the voice of Francie kind of looking back on his childhood, which is sort of reassuring because there are several points in the film where without that you would suspect he's about to die. But there's also something horrible about it in that it basically confirms that Francie has no path to the future other than turning into his useless alcoholic dad, because they're played by the same actor.
Yeah, that's a nice little it's a nice bitter irony to that, isn't it? It's like, well, you're going to turn into your dad in a way. Yeah.
But he's still, even during that brief moment where we do see him as an adult, he is still seeing the Virgin Mary. So there's still some bit of the sort of imagination that he had in his youth that's still around, even if it's been brutally suppressed by the asylums.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, a sweary Virgin Mary as well. Fuck's sake, Francie.
It's very funny, but it reminds you that for O'Connor can be very funny. I have a great fondness for when she spent a while doing backing vocals for the American singer-songwriter John Grant, and she was asked about Grant in an interview, and she said something like, if that man ever reconsiders his homosexuality, I am oiled up and waiting, which is incredibly Sinead O'Connor.
I mean, even like, I remember on Bang Bang It Streaves and Mortimer, where she has to sit through Donald and Davy starts. And it's just a mark of how she sort of like engages in that you can see this is a woman with a sense of humor.
I think she has a great sense of humor, but artistically, there is a core of sincerity to everything she does. And I think that's part of what makes this performance, which on paper is an outrageous joke. I mean, I admit part of why I want to see this film was I want to see the film where Sinead O'Connor plays the Virgin Mary, but but there is always this core of honesty and seriousness to everything she does, and that's what makes her such a great artist and icon, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got a lot of time for it. She's a really interesting voice, and I think it's unfair the amount of shit that gets heaped on her, especially knowing that she has her problems. You know, I think that people still insist on, you know, into the cranky woman. You know, that horrible sort of that mentality that press have. I think it's just graceful in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, it's interesting looking back at her very early career and realizing what I don't want to say she could have had, because I think she's been very open recently, particularly in her autobiography Rememberings and in this documentary. She's been very upfront in saying that she didn't get into this to be a pop star. She wanted to play live music, and she was happy being a pop star at first because it meant she could do that more often, but she was never going to get on with what you have to do to remain a pop star.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine, you know.
There's a fine line, isn't there? I mean, there's pop stars and there's artists. And there's a reason why they're called artists, really, isn't there? And artists have opinions and they deliver statements and they don't see the work as just bubblegum, or that, you know, you release a record and then you do so many nights and then you wait a year and do another record and do the same thing ad infinitum. You know, you've got a fan base and you want to speak to that fan base. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. But even on that first album, before Am I Not Your Girl, you know, there's a lot of very forward-thinking stuff on there. You know, she's doing traditional Irish songs, but she is doing them with beats. She is doing them with guest verses from MC Light, and it's the sort of thing where you think if she had any interest in being a pop star, the world would have been hers to grab. You know, it really reminds you that she walks away very consciously from that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, people would say Madonna's an artist, but like you say, there's a lot more canny marketing ideas going on there.
Yeah.
That she just doesn't have any time for. What there's playing. Some people are allowed to play some people are allowed to have their say in an image and play the game at the same time. I think that's the difference.
I think Madonna is very canny at realizing how to go like an inch further than the line that people are comfortable with. You know, she's one of those artists like Tarantino who was made a very good career on being the sort of trusted brand who can take a mainstream American audience a little bit further than they want. And that's, you know, there's a certain genius in that. But I think what made Sinead O'Connor radioactive is that when she ripped that photo of the Pope in half on Saturday Night Live, again, it's the sincerity. She obviously meant it. It's not like Madonna swearing on Letterman where you can just roll your eyes and go, oh yeah, doing that again, is she? There is this
it's not a stunt.
total conviction to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that, I mean, it was the Bob Dylan birthday
Yes.
thing. The fact that, you know, that has repercussions, and she is not afraid to face down those repercussions. And you know, alone in a storm of disapproval, and just say, well, you know, I think that's incredible.
I watched that clip for the first time. I was always aware that it had happened, but I watched that clip for the first time in the run up to this, and it's really electrifying. I mean, it's her roughest performance in a lot of ways because she doesn't want the audience to enjoy what she's doing, and it gains a lot of power from that. But I was also just really charmed by Kris Kristofferson going up to her when the booing was at its peak. And according to O'Connor, he just whispered in her ear, "Don't let the bastards get you down."
Yeah, Kris Kristofferson as Arthur Seaton in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning.
Yes, the crossover we never knew we wanted.
No, he's lovely, Kris Kristofferson. He's absolutely really good, really, really sweet. That they have a good relationship, I believe.
There's one musical connection that we haven't mentioned here, which is the title, because even the title of it is an Irish folk ballad.
Yes, it's the record that Francie's mum brings back from the asylum, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is played over and over again, which suggests that the asylum hasn't really done the work that was required.
Because it's such a horrible song, you know. It's the story of someone who's spurned by the man that she loves and goes home and hangs herself. It's a typical cheery Irish folk song. But it's been recorded by loads of people. O'Connor's done her own version of it. Kirsty MacColl did. There's an amazing, almost industrial sounding version by Lamb Chop, which I think is fantastic.
Fair enough. Never knew that one, no.
Yeah, but it's sort of, it's in moments like that with the treatment of Francie's mum that you can see how another take on this book could have been that kind of Angela's Ashes thing. Because the scene where Francie comes home and sees his mum like in the attic standing on the chair, and you know what he's just caught of about to do, but he doesn't have a clue. There's a sort of dark humour to it, but it's real heart in mouth stuff as well, as it's a horrible way to it.
It's bleak, definitely, and as you say, it could go in that direction. I think the great thing about Cabe's writing or the film in itself is that it's all from Francie's point of view. Like you say, he doesn't really understand what's going on, so he creates a world where he tries to couch what he's just seen in his own terms. So he hears the word breakdown, doesn't he? And the only type of connotation he's got for a breakdown is, you know, your car breaks down, you take it to the garage, you get it fixed. So his whole thing is like his mum's like a car going getting fixed to the garage. You know, they've got the right sprocket on a head kind of thing. And he has that thing where he talks to the villagers with the same kind of talks to them in sort of older beyond his years, sort of patter, doesn't he? Which they find endearing and charming, rather than a cause for like, this boy's not right, you know?
But I think that's part of why you stick with Francie, despite him being a horrible kid, because the film keeps reminding you that there is this innocence and ignorance to him. He doesn't comprehend the scale of what he's doing, even when the story gets really dark at the end. There's this kind of obliviousness to it.
Yeah. He's a damaged individual, isn't he? And again,
Yeah.
there is a film where you could tell that story from that perspective and just go, "Oh, woe is me, he's a damaged individual," and it could be that sort of misery porn type film. But this is just, like you say, it crackles with vibrancy, and it's really black. I mean, it's a. I'm not surprised they said it was unfilmable, because you could imagine. I mean, I've not read the book, but you could imagine. I mean, I can just imagine somebody trying to explain this and go, that's not gonna. What, you follow an interview with a vampire up and Michael Collins up with this?
Yeah, there is no part for Brad Pitt in this movie.
No, there really isn't. So it is, kudos to them. And again, I think there's a myth that like Hollywood stopped taking risks after Heaven's Gate or something like that. But obviously Geffen and maybe it takes an outsider to faith in an Ortega, perhaps. But Jordan was given a blank check really to make a film like this. I mean,
it might just be
everybody said it's unfilmable.
Yeah, it could just be that each era's risks are only really obvious in retrospect when you're not in the middle of them. Because it's like, I look back at this now and I think, holy shit. I mean, not just in terms of the transgressive content of it, or even the Irishness of it, which is so different to like any commercial vision of Irishness that we've been talking about.
There's no donkey in the street or an old guy playing a fiddle in a pub.
Well, this was made in the same year that there was that infamous week when EastEnders went to Ireland. And it's like, people have forgotten about that now because it's so embarrassing. But their version of Ireland seemed to be, it's like Hard to Be a God, but with more donkeys. That seemed to be like the size of it.
It was deluge after deluge of complaints, wasn't it? That and you've got like it's the mid-90s, and you have a 19-year-old Irish girl talking about the wail of the banshee.
Yes,
like that,
she didn't understand how mainlanders could like know if someone was dead unless they'd heard the wail of the banshee.
I mean, the great thing is it was the Fowles and the Beals that went over, wasn't it? And Ian Beale's there, of course. Now, he should have just explained that he was from Chip Chop, and they'd be like, potato. No, you chip the potato and sell it freely.
You damage the sacred potato. Yeah, absolute insanity. And for this to like share a century with the Butcher Boy, let alone a year of release, is just beyond thought. But I mean, the other thing is, I don't think people make adaptations of books that are difficult anymore. I don't think there's such a thing. It was very much present in the 90s where people who were at a certain level as a director would say, right, next movie, I'm doing Naked Lunch, I'm doing Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I'm going to be the guy who pulls that off. And I think that's all kind of migrated over to television now, but maybe we'll be
true.
We could be looking back at the indies and the foreign films released today and in 20 years and saying you'd never get a film like Pleasure or Happening or something like that made today. You don't know.
Yeah, who knows? That's true.
But yeah, it's a fabulous film, and I'm really glad we got round to it. And it does remind you that Neil Jordan at his best is a completely uncompromising guy.
Yeah, and it's a director that you should just say never write him off, because you never know, something else might be around the corner. So it's always worth checking in on him to see what he's doing, really, is.
Definitely, yeah. But before we go, socials, you mentioned you were on Letterboxd. Are there any other areas where people can catch you?
Instagram.
Mm.
Yeah, you can look for Mark Cunliffe on Instagram, and I should be there under the name I Well. But mainly, that's just that and Letterboxd. Really, they are the only things I do social.
Yeah, Letterboxd is my big thing. I'm on Letterboxd, just as Graham Williamson. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Graham W Films, and that's where I am. Apart, obviously, from all the places where we write for, which we covered at the start. But that's been it for Halloween week of Halloween month, rather, of Pop Screen. It's very rare that we have you on our Halloween show classing it up. Although I'm not sure I could describe what you've just done as classing it up, but you know what I mean?
The man who is currently hating every second of Letterboxd because everybody's reviewing horror films. And I'm like,
yes.
So dull, so dull.
Well, yeah. But every now and then you find something that falls under that umbrella that is just, I think, for us both, that we can both enjoy, and this is definitely one of those films.
Yeah, absolutely, that is true. Yeah, I'm not a hater of horror. I just find that people watching it constantly every day for a month.
Yeah,
I like variety of what people are writing about. So it's like,
completely.
you're watching another horror movie, right?
Well, if you want variety, I can reveal that next month we are planning to tie in to the release of Weird, the Al Yankovic story, starring Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Al Yankovic. Yeah. We are doing UHF sometime next month, so look out for that.
You will do.
And that will be a bit of a U-turn from X and the Butcher Boy, I think.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But until then, that's been Pop Screen. I've been Graham.
And I've been Mark.
And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.